All right, so I think we'll get started now. Welcome everyone. My name is Tarika and I work at RMIT University, and also joining me today is Annalisa from Swinburne. But for the purposes of today, we'll be representing TIS. So TIS is basically a collective of universities, TAFEs and ITCs, and our job is basically to let you know what your options are in your senior years of high school and also after you've finished as well. We also have joining us is Phil Newman, who is the career advisor at Wantirna College. So you'll be able to ask any questions you have throughout the session to us or for Phil, and pop it in the chat and we can answer that towards the end of the session as well. So this is the Year 10 session. So hopefully you guys are all in Year 10 joining us today, and you're having to think about what to expect and what to kind of do and what next steps are to prepare yourself for Year 11 and Year 12. So hopefully you'll get all those questions answered. But before we officially begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we are on and pay my respect to any elders past, present and emerging. But I will pass on to Anna now to talk about types of senior school study.
Thanks, Tarika. So before we talk about what comes after high school, we'll quickly provide an overview of the senior school study types available for you. So first up, we do have VCE, which is the most popular option for Year 11 and 12 students. So in VCE, that stands for Victorian Certificate of Education, and students generally study 5 or 6 subjects across 2 years, and there are over 90 VCE subjects options and also 20 VCE VET courses options to choose from. VCE graduates generally receive an ATAR score, which is generated by the combination of your individual subject scores, and the ATAR score is used to apply for tertiary education courses. VCE graduates are considered more academically prepared to study a higher education course, which is a bachelor or undergraduate degree that are offered generally at universities, independent colleges, some TAFEs, and definitely some dual sector universities as well. But with that said, VCE students are also welcome to apply for the vocational education sector. So that's more towards certificate and diploma level courses. Next up, we have VCAL. So VCAL stands for Victorian Certificate of Applied Learning. This is very much hands-on learning that provides pathways to many careers and further education. So you can use this as a pathway option if you'd like to go into a degree. Students can complete a VET certificate, a school-based apprenticeship or a traineeship whilst completing VCAL. And VCAL graduates receive a certificate and a statement of result, and they're eligible to apply for vocational education courses, such as your certificates and diplomas again, and then use that into higher education. So many of you have probably heard the term of pathways already. It's essentially an alternative route to help you get into your dream course, but we will touch on pathways a little bit more in the presentation. And finally, we have IB, or not finally, the second last one, sorry. So we have IB. So this is not offered at all schools within Victoria, and IB students tend to be more internationally focused type of study. IB students are required to complete 6 subject areas, which include literature, science, maths, humanities, a foreign modern language, and also an elective subject from these study areas. IB prepares students for higher education courses, especially for students who would like to study overseas. It's also worth noting that these students get their results after VCE students. So this is something to be mindful when you're in Year 12, but it won't have a direct impact on your chances of being made an offer from a tertiary education provider. And finally, we have VET. So if you are doing a VET subject, you definitely should know soon, or you've already said yes to your career practitioner that you'd like to do a VET subject, but it's essentially a vocational education and training. That's what it stands for. And it is nationally recognized training as part of VCE and or VCAL. So now I'm going to pass back to Tarika, and she's going to explain why you should choose tertiary education.
Thanks, Anna. So there's a few reasons why people look to go into tertiary studies. I guess the main thing is, and the main fun fact to know is that we are living longer, and that does mean that if you are living longer, most likely we'll be working a lot longer as well. So you might have your parents or your grandparents who might have only had maybe 1 or 2 different types of jobs in their lifetime. Studies have shown now that you'll probably have 15 different jobs in 7 different fields of study once you guys graduate. So I guess it's really kind of good to know that if you start off in an area now, you can always change your mind and go into something later on. You're never really locked in, and you can really kind of make the most of different kind of jobs and career outcomes throughout your career journey as well. So I guess with this, you have to often get soft and transferable skills from different programs. So something that you learn at tertiary studies, besides just the content from the program, is things like problem solving, communication skills, analytical skills, and things like that. And these kind of skills are really important because this will help you with any job you go into. So whether you start off in a particular program, you might learn teamwork from a group assignment, and then you can use that in the workforce. And then you can use something that you've learned in that job when you go on for your next job, and so on. And I guess because we are kind of moving more towards lifelong learning, as opposed to just doing one course and one job and calling it a day, it does mean that you might be looking at maybe studying once you're a bit older as well. So your studies might not just end after high school once you do a TAFE program or a degree or anything like that. It might mean that, you might be, a few years into studies, and you might want to do another qualification and maybe do a certificate or another degree or anything like that, or a postgrad program. So it's really exciting to kind of see how that does change when you compare yourself to your parents and grandparents. But yeah, those soft and transferable skills make it a lot more easy for you to find employment, and one of the reasons why people look at taking up tertiary studies. And I'll pass on to Anna to talk about the different types of studies you can do now.
So once you complete year 12, you're going to have a few options available for you, and it is going to depend on the type of study you're going to have in year 11 and 12. So now I'm just going to run through each option for you. So the first one we have are certificates, diplomas, and advanced diplomas. So these qualifications are what we call vocational education, and are usually taught at TAFEs, independent tertiary colleges, and dual sector universities. TAFE courses can usually be completed within 6 to 2 years. It just depends if you're doing a certificate or perhaps an advanced diploma, although apprenticeships can be 3 to 4 years long. ATAR scores are generally not required for these courses, meaning that both VCAL and VCE students can apply for them. And when it comes to diplomas and advanced diplomas, they can often provide pathways and credit into those bachelor degrees. As I mentioned, we will touch on pathways a little bit later on the presentation. Vocational education can often be hands-on learning, where students learn practical skills to make sure you are work ready. And the learning environment is very similar to what you're experiencing now in high school. So you're going to be spending a lot of time moving about with the same classmates. And students on an average, I'd say, spend about 20 to 25 hours per week at TAFE, which is a little bit different to what you'll expect if you decide to go to university. So next we do have bachelor degrees, which is also known as undergraduate degrees. These are the terms we tend to interchange, so don't be thrown off if I'm saying bachelor and Tariq is saying undergraduate. It does mean the same thing. So a bachelor degree normally takes 3 to 5 years to complete, and is a combination of theory and practical learning, as well as individual and team learning. If you go into a bachelor degree, you are expected to do a lot of independent learning, where often you'll attend lectures, tutorials, and workshops. And you may not be with the same group of students for every class. So you might have Business 101 with one group of people, and you might have economics with another group of people. So it's not like a diploma where you're going to constantly be with the same classroom. So most bachelor degrees are taught at universities, but ITCs and TAFEs also offer more specialised degree options. So it's really important to do your research if you know you want to do a bachelor degree program, maybe just doing research in terms of, do you want to go to a university, or do you want to go to something like an ITC or a TAFE? A student at a university generally has less contact hours, but exam revision and assignments may need to be completed outside of class. So unlike your diploma, where I've said you had to be there for 20 to 25 hours, if you're interested in doing a bachelor degree program, you're generally going to be on class 12 to 16 hours, and another 12 to 16 hours in your own time. So I'm meaning 12 to 16 hours per week, sorry, to be clear. However, some students may have a much bigger workload depending on what course they're studying. So if you're someone who's interested in, say, vet studies, medicine, engineering, or law, you will just need to expect that you'll have a lot more contact hours on campus. Students who complete VCE and IB are eligible to apply for these courses via VTAC. And then we also have independent tertiary colleges, which we generally call ITCs, the acronym. So ITCs offer both vocational and higher education. So all levels of study, it can be a certificate, a diploma, or a degree. So this means all students can find a course, whether you have completed IB, VCE, or VCAL. ITCs tend to specialize in specific fields. So for example, a specialty could be IT, hospitality, or beauty. So when it comes to course fees, they often have full fee places, or you can also apply for fee help. Again, really important for you to do a little bit of research independently, especially if you're jumping into second semester now, and just trying to familiarize yourself with how fees work and also the different types of categories of certificates and diplomas and degrees. But now I'll hand back to Tarika to talk about how you actually get into tertiary education.
Awesome. So when you are looking at getting into tertiary studies, there are a few things that institutes kind of look at in order to be considered. So prerequisites and selection requirements, you've probably heard of them. If you haven't, they're basically things that you need to complete as a part of your application in order to be considered for particular programs. So something like for example, an engineering program might require a maths prerequisite, or if you want to do a science program, it might have a science prerequisite. So that basically means you need to complete those subjects in order to be considered. And there's often study scores that are required for those as well. So you might need a study score of say 20 or 25 or whatever it was, and they do vary from institute to institute. So it's really important that you are doing your research to make sure you're picking the right subjects now for courses that you might be interested in doing once you finish year 12. So you can find out what prerequisite subjects are required for each program on the individual institution websites, and you can also see it on VTAC as well. So definitely make sure you go and have a look. If you're interested in a certain area, make sure you go and see what the prerequisite subjects are. Maybe have a look at a few institutes that you might think about studying at, and that can really give you a good understanding of what to kind of select and what subjects to pick. When you are picking your 10 subjects, it's really important to kind of keep your options open as well. Have a chat to your parents, have a chat to, your friends, your teachers, and then they can really help you making sure you're picking the right subjects. Because if you don't select the right prerequisite for a particular program, even if you have a really high ATAR, even if it's 99, if you don't have the right prerequisite subject, it just means that you won't be able to directly apply for that program, and you'll need to consider a pathway. So a pathway is basically getting from where you are to where you want to be, a bit of a stepping stone process. It's really a good option, especially these days when things don't go to plan, where you don't get the right ATAR, or you realize that you needed that certain subject or the right score in that certain subject and you didn't get it. And really pathways really do help a lot with that. So definitely something to kind of think about. And most institutes offer pathway options or can guide you with that information as well. But I guess the main takeaway there is make sure you do research with that. But we'll pass on to Anna to talk about how you can go on with that as well.
Thanks, Tarika. So now I'm going to touch on what support is available. So the great thing about being in year 10 is that you still have a good 2 years ahead of you to start doing a lot of research in tertiary education. So I definitely encourage you to start doing the research, and we call it the researching of 3 Ps, which stand for people, places, and publications. So the first one is people. So make sure you utilize people around you. There's a lot of support services there for you to utilize. That could be your career practitioner or your career counselor. If you know you're interested in, say, science, definitely talk to your science coordinator. Get a nice understanding of where your strengths are and where you'd like to go in the future. I mean, a lot of your teachers, all of them should have gone to university. They can also give you their 2 cents and what their experience was like studying particular subjects. If you know someone in the industry even, I'd encourage you to reach out to them and have a one-on-one conversation conversation with them, or maybe make a LinkedIn profile, or just go on LinkedIn and start looking at people that you aspire to be like and just understand their kind of journey of how they got there. But you can also chat to people like myself or Tarika. So we work in student recruitment, which means we really connect with high school students across Australia. So there's going to be a few events and whatnot for you to attend. And that kind of takes me back to places. So when we're talking about places, I would encourage you to go out there and check places out like universities, like your TAFEs, like your ITCs. Because if you think about it, if you're going to go onto tertiary education, maybe you're going to do a bachelor degree program, and that is generally 3 years full time as a minimum requirement. And you want to make sure where you choose is the right place for you. So check out the universities, make sure it's your kind of vibe. If you're more social, you might be attracted to one university over another. If you're interested in more work understanding or having some work integrated learning, again, make sure you do your research and just check out those institutions. And we also have publications. So unfortunately, due to COVID this year and also last year, you probably don't get a lot of the physical material of a course guide, but be rest assured there's a lot of information available online for you to utilize. So I do encourage you to jump on to VTAC's website and also check out the institution individually and see what courses they have available for you as well. But that pretty much concludes this part of the webinar. And now we're going to go back to Tarika and Phil, and we'll open it up to Q&A. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask us, please feel free to chuck that in the Q&A function, and we'll be able to answer that live. But right now, I'll hand back to you, Tarika.
Great, thank you. So for those of you that joined us a little bit later, we do have Phil joining us today, who's a career advisor at One Turner College. So we're going to ask him a few questions. We'll get straight into it, Phil. What should students consider when deciding which program, VCAL or VCE or IB, to study in Year 12?
Okay, thanks, Tarika. That's a really important question. I just want to make sure that everyone understands that when I speak today, I'm going to be giving you some very general advice, and I would really encourage you to make the decisions that you make after talking to your school and to your parents. That's the most important thing to remember. So in terms of which program you should consider doing. So if you really prefer an applied learning environment, that hands-on style of learning, then VCAL is definitely worth you researching. Some students may not enjoy academic learning so much, and that may be another reason why they may want to consider VCAL. Some schools offer VCAL with very much a teams-based approach. So if you enjoy working together with other students, and on project type work rather than doing tests and exams, again, that can be a point to consider. The main attraction for VCAL from my perspective is that it offers a work placement and work integrated learning. So in addition to that hands-on style of learning in your school, you'll have the opportunity to work in a workplace. I would also say if university is an unlikely destination for you, then that's an important thing to take into account with VCAL. So we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. But for somebody who thinks VCE is a very likely, university is a very likely destination, then VCE is what I would suggest you would be considering. So if you enjoy more academic learning, and you definitely have a pathway that you know is going to take you into university when you finish high school, then you should be looking at that. And the subject choices have already been touched on. What you're good at, what you enjoy, and perhaps subjects that you need. Those are really important things to consider in VCE. But most definitely talk to your careers counsellor because they will be able to give you advice on subjects in addition to your subject teachers. That gives you a much broader view of what your VCE is going to look like. You definitely don't need to fill up a VCE with subjects that are all related to a specific career. So just keep in mind those pieces of advice about choosing. So I would just finish on that by saying it's just really important to know what it is you're choosing. So know about your subjects, do your research before you make your choice. As far as the IB is concerned, I'm not in an IB school, but if you are in an IB school, the best person to talk to about whether you should do IB or VCAL will be the staff members who are involved in that. They will most definitely be able to give you good advice on that.
Yep, awesome. Thank you, Phil. And yeah, just reiterating what you said, it's really important that you do have these conversations with your career practitioner so you understand what options are available for you. My second question, Phil, is what should students think about when considering which maths is the right level for them to study?
Yeah, another good question. Probably the simplest way to answer that is to choose the highest level of maths that you believe that you can do. And it's really important that you talk to your maths teacher about that because they will be able to help you make that decision. So sometimes students might want to discontinue maths because they feel like it's not going to be part of their future pathway. But it is really important when we talk about keeping options open. Sometimes that may involve choosing a maths that perhaps is a little bit challenging, but if you know that you're going to be capable of doing that, it's important to really think about whether you take that on, because if your plans change, you may end up regretting your decision. So really emphasising to work with your school on that, because it can be a little tricky to take up a higher level of maths later on. We say nothing is ever final, but it's about making the most of your opportunities now.
Yeah, and I think from a university perspective as well for everyone, if you're interested in, say, going into something like a Bachelor of Engineering, it's really important that you choose the correct type of maths as well. So as Tarika mentioned, there are prerequisites, and with those prerequisites, we do clearly outline what subjects we expect you to have completed in VCE. So also something to keep in mind. Also, if you want to be a teacher, for example, you'd need at least further mathematics behind you in order to be eligible for the course.
Great, so we'll move on to the next question now. While Year 12 might seem a long time away, should Year 10s consider what options might be available as pathways now? Good segue.
Yes, yes, absolutely. In my school, we are always talking about choosing your dream course, and then, in a sense, working back from there to see, well, what are some of the pathways that I could use to reach that destination? Should things change along the way, or should perhaps there be a few hurdles that we might have difficulty overcoming? So we certainly know that TAFE and university offer a lot of alternatives, and this is where the research comes in, and your careers practitioner will help with this. But you can definitely start planning for this in Year 10. Your school might even be doing some pathways planning already. So it's certainly not too early to be thinking about this. Yeah.
Okay. Next question, Phil, is if I've chosen to study VCAL in year 11 and 12, can I still go to university?
Yes, so there are definitely pathways from VCAL into university. I think it's important just to keep in mind what they may look like, and this is where planning is important. So I know from experience that VCAL students, often they've made a choice to go down a vocational path, and that's terrific, but occasionally might change their mind and say, well, actually I need to now navigate my way from Year 12 into university. So definitely TAFE provides that option, and it's a similar style of learning to what students in VCAL are already used to. So it makes that transition a little bit easier. It's important though to keep in mind that not every course at a university has a straightforward pathway. So some are a little bit more easy to navigate to than others, and some are going to take less time, some are going to take more time. So as long as you're aware of that, you can definitely go into VCAL just being assured that you've not cut off your options to university. There are ways, and you just need to be aware that it may just take you a little longer to do that.
Yeah, Awesome, thanks, Phil. And another question is, choosing your subjects now in year 10 sometimes can feel very final or locked in. For your senior years, what options are there if students decide if they want to change subjects or need after deciding on their desired course?
Okay, so in going into year 11, there are definitely some opportunities to change. Now, again, you would need to talk with your school because they'll all have their own processes about how that would work. And they'll all have their own limits on what opportunities there are. So sometimes when you're making a choice for year 11, you may find that subjects are not always available to change into, but it's definitely possible from a planning point of view that you can make those changes in year 11. So going into year 12, in year 12, you do have to make decisions about what subjects are going to do for a full year. And so when making those choices, if you feel like you're locked into your year 12 program, there are choices, and again, long-term planning is important here. There are choices beyond year 12 that you may be able to make to perhaps realign your destination. So I think maths as a prerequisite is one that often comes up. What if I'm not doing the correct level of maths? That's probably one of the more difficult ones to change, but it can be changed if you navigate the right pathway for that. So a bit of a tricky question, that one, but I think it's partly answered by looking back at the idea of following a pathway.
Great, thank you. And we have a few questions in the chat now. So there is a question, is it good to do 2 VCE units 3 and 4 subjects in year 11? So what would your advice be there?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Look, that really comes down to the individual. And again, I would ask you to get the advice from your school. I would say for many people, doing 1 year 12 subject in year 11 is a good option if you feel like you're able to do that. Doing a second year 12 subject does present some additional challenges. The best benefit that, from my point of view, about doing a year 12 subject in year 11 is that you have the chance to go through all those processes of preparing for exams and getting that feedback at the end of that subject, so that you have a good sense of what the work was like and what your success was like at the end. So doing an extra subject in year 11 is really a special decision to make as an individual. I don't necessarily recommend it one way or the other. I think it does come down to a discussion that you need to have with your school. I know that some students will often do a language outside the school that the school doesn't offer, and that might mean that they have a different kind of study program, but it is still a year 12 level subject, and that needs to be taken into account. So yeah, I'm going to have to be quite open in my answer on that and say it does depend on the person.
Yeah. Another question we have is, what is VTAC? Phil, I feel like you definitely know this because you work with all your year 12 students.
Sorry, so what, can you just repeat the question,
Yeah,
Anna?
what
Sorry.
is VTAC?
Okay, so VTAC is the organisation that for the vast majority of university courses handles a single application from students. So it does make the process of applying for university quite straightforward, in that you only need to do one application and you put your courses in a preference order, and it handles all of the applications on behalf of the university. So it does make that process quite a bit more straightforward. They even handle a lot of the administrative work in terms of getting interviews set up and auditions, and that sort of process as well. So anything else that you would add to that, Anna or Tarika?
Yeah, so VTAC is pretty much the acronym for Victorian Tertiary Admissions Centre. So it's something that you'll be very much familiarised when you are in year 12. So essentially what you can do is list up to 8 preferences of where you'd like to study. It is external to universities and TAFEs. So you get to preference your 8 preferences pretty much. Your dream course should be number 1. And then when you do receive your results, like your ATAR and study scores, that's where you can kind of go back, rearrange your preferences if you have met the prerequisites like Tarika touched on or not, and also put pathway options in there. So it's essentially just a really big application that you get to submit. It's only through VTAC, and then you get to apply to multiple institutions and multiple courses at that one given time.
Probably worth adding, there are a couple of institutions that don't use VTAC, so particularly the TAFEs.
Yeah, that's right. So
Yeah.
some TAFEs, sometimes they do participate in VTAC and sometimes it's a direct application.
Yeah.
So when you reach year 12 and you're thinking about jumping into tertiary education, or if you're in year 11, year 10 going into tertiary education, whatever it may be, definitely go and visit the Institute's individual website and check how you can apply to study there.
Yeah.
Another question I have is from Garitha, I hope I pronounced that right. And she's asked, for VCE students who would like to enter into engineering or medicine in tertiary education, what subject choices to be made in year 10, 11 and 12? Any direct contact to reach out, please. So that's a great question, and that's a very course specific question. I definitely know Swinburne, where I work, and RMIT, where Tarika works, we do offer engineering as a degree option. Again, our prerequisites might be a little bit different. So across the board, you would have to do at least math methods, also score relatively well in English, and you do need to obtain a particular ATAR score. I know that answer is really, really general, but it's because it genuinely depends on the institution and which degree you're going into. So is it just the Bachelor of Engineering, or is it a double in engineering? Because those prerequisites and ATAR requirements may change. In terms of medicine, again, I would encourage you to start researching which universities have them on offer. I know Melbourne and Monash offer medicine. However, there are also pathways to get into Melbourne and Monash if you don't reach the ATAR straight away after year 12 to get into one of those universities. So definitely jump onto their websites, check out their prerequisites, check out their ATAR requirements, and then also jump onto another institution and just start comparing what you need in order to get into your dream course.
Yeah, I'd be happy to add to that too, Anna, that looking at physics and chemistry, you'll find that one or both of those may be prerequisites. Again, you need to check with the course, but they will be definitely subjects to be considering. And it may go beyond those as sciences, but certainly looking at maths, physics and chemistry as a starting point in your investigation. Yeah.
And we have another question here from an anonymous attendee. And he or she asks, is it bad if most of your VCE subjects are English or humanities based?
No, definitely not. If we think about that idea that if you're choosing subjects that you do well at and you enjoy, provided that you're not cutting out a prerequisite subject that you need, it is definitely not a bad thing for that to be your choice. VCE is designed to make it as far as possible for students to study the subjects that they can excel in, and not be disadvantaged in any way.
Yeah.
And yeah, in terms of prerequisites, yeah, that's a different decision, but it is definitely not a bad thing. What I would even say to that is that English being a subject that everyone must do, what you are in fact doing in a course which is more weighted in humanities, is it's actually complemented by English and vice versa. And being able to communicate is an important skill across all of higher education.
Yeah, and we all have a lot of strengths and we have different areas of interest. So if you already can identify that your strengths and your passion is in English and humanities, that's fantastic. I definitely encourage students who perhaps don't know exactly what they want to study to pick the subjects they're good at and pick the subjects that they find interesting, because working at a university, I often find there's a lot of people who come back maybe at 30, 40, 50 years of age, and because they didn't follow their passion, all of a sudden they want to have a career change and do something completely different because they didn't take that opportunity up when they were younger. So definitely play to your passions, because even if you can't see the career outcome right now, each step's going to help you lead to your destination.
Great. So we have another question in the chat. If I'm not happy with my VCE result for a particular subject, can I redo it? So I'm sure you've heard that one before.
Yes, you can do that. It's a good question, but I guess what I would be thinking about in terms of finishing year 12 and not being happy with a particular result is I would be asking, is that actually the right decision to do? So again, that would be a conversation that you would need to have with your careers practitioner, and it depends on what type of course you're applying for. So there's a whole lot of factors to consider around that. So I'm not going to say that you wouldn't do that, but I would say that there are a lot of different options that might make you reconsider whether you need to do that. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as we mentioned earlier, this is where pathways can come into play. So if things don't go to plan, you can look at doing a certificate or a diploma or a TAFE program, and then using that as a pathway to get into what you want to do, because there'll always be multiple options. So it doesn't always mean you need to redo the subject or redo year 12 or a certain subject again as well. So we have another specific question in the chat. So what VCE subjects do you need or suggest for criminal justice and criminology?
Okay, so yeah, that's a quite specific pair of courses, and my suggestion is, if you're interested in those as courses, you're probably going to choose legal studies, but then I would add to that some courses that are also going to enhance your communication skills, which you're going to enjoy doing. There isn't that much more beyond that that is going to be essential for you to go down that pathway, although you would need to look carefully at that course and see if there is a selection of prerequisites that you might pick from. So I think, be guided by what you like about the destination that you're heading towards in choosing your VCE, but don't be too concerned about filling up your VCE subjects with courses that you think you will need to do. Because once you've got the prerequisites covered, you usually have a lot of room in your VCE to add other subjects.
Definitely. And your first year of any tertiary studies is usually entry-level kind of subjects anyway. So if it isn't a required prerequisite, that means they're probably going to give you an introductory subject in your first year. So don't stress too much if you don't have that. Because I know, for example, for a lot of institutions, if you don't have a business, if you didn't do business in year 12, you can still get into the business degree because they start from scratch in their first year. So that's just something to kind of think about. There is another question in the chat. Does your ATAR genuinely matter? A bit of a loaded one.
I feel like we can all take a bit of an answer to this. I might go first. So yeah, ATAR, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, because we do ask you to aspire to do well in year 12, especially if you know what course you're interested in. That's the reason we do have ATAR requirements. But if your question's more, does your ATAR score stick with you forever? Does it define you as a person? Definitely not. We understand that things can happen throughout year 12. We understand that you may have better strengths in other areas of academia, in compared to others, and maybe you don't want to obtain an ATAR score. So if you're a student who doesn't want to do VCE and you're more situated for VCAL, that doesn't mean anything negative at all. It just means you're taking a different pathway, and that's completely fine. Not everyone wants to be a doctor, but not everyone wants to be an electrician. There's a lot of jobs, a lot of careers, a lot of passion out there. So when it comes to your ATAR, if you are someone who wants to obtain an ATAR because you want to go to university, but you didn't get the ATAR you expected, it's okay to feel a bit upset about that. It's only human, but just be rest assured it does not define you as a person. And as we mentioned, there's a lot of different alternatives, different pathways, and a lot of support out there for you to get to your dream course. So it may take a little bit longer, it may not take a lot longer, just depending on your avenue of study. But for me, from my perspective, ATAR, I don't want to say it doesn't matter. I definitely think you should do well in your studies if you want to go and do tertiary education. But do I think it defines you as a person? I definitely would not say that.
Yeah, I would say that the ATAR is, for a year 12 student, is a really good opportunity. So think of it more like that rather than something that may present itself as being something of an obstacle or something that leads to stress. We don't, some stress is good in year 12, but we don't want students to be too fixated on whether they're going to get that right ATAR. Focus on the learning, because that's what year 12 is about. That's what university is about, focusing on that, so that, and certainly have the plans behind you, but realize it's an opportunity. It's not something that's going to define you, as Anna said.
Okay, and the next question I have here is, if I don't pass the CASPER test, does that mean I can't get into a teaching course? That is a very good question. So the CASPER test is something you must do. It's a selection requirement before you are made an offer into the Bachelor of Education. I know at Swinburne we offer the Bachelor of Education. Tarika, feel free to chime in if RMIT has it. But from my knowledge, because it is a selection requirement, we must get that tick. So it's not necessarily a fail in a CASPER test. A CASPER test isn't a hard pass or a hard fail. You can't really get answers wrong in that sense. It's more of a personality, mental type test, but it is a prerequisite or a selection requirement that you need in order to get into something like the Bachelor of Education, whether that's primary or perhaps secondary at some other universities.
Yep, that's exactly right. Same for us as well. So I guess if you do not make it into the program, or you don't do as well as what the requirements are, then that's again where pathways come into play. And you look at doing maybe a TAFE program and using those marks and a bit of work experience to build your resume and build your application up to apply for the degree later on. Or you might have the opportunity of resetting the test depending on what the requirements and the rules are around that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it might be that you actually choose to do a bachelor degree first in an area of interest, and then you can add your teaching course to that after you're finished.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. And another question is, I think it's because we mentioned this in the presentation, is how many VCE subjects are available in year 11 and 12? So I think I've mentioned 90, but someone's also commented that they don't have 90 subjects available for them. I completely understand that it is going to be very much dependent on the school you attend. Hopefully, if you're in year 10, you have either done subject selection or you're heading into it. Hopefully you've had those conversations or have looked at the subjects available for you. But just keep in mind that not all schools will have the same subjects available to them. Even when it comes to English, the book you read isn't necessarily going to be the same book the school down the road reads. There's going to be different variations throughout year 12. But Phil, maybe you can give us a nice overview of what it's like in Wantirna.
Yeah, look, it's a good question. So you'll only be able to choose generally what your school offers. I would suggest that when you're choosing subjects, please choose exactly what you want to do. Don't leave something out because maybe you've heard that that subject doesn't always run. If you want to do it, absolutely choose it, because schools make decisions on what subjects they will run based on student interests. So that's one thing I would say. Not all schools are necessarily going to be able to I guess, take you through this option, but in some circumstances, it might be possible to do a subject that's not offered by your school through distance education. So, but you would need to talk to your school about that to see whether that's an option for you.
Great, thank you. And we are getting towards the end of time, so we have 2 more questions to go. So which one, VCE, VCAL, IB, VET, or VET, is important to get into university quickly? So I know that is probably not an answer, but could you speak to that a little bit, Phil, please?
Yeah, look, if you're definitely aiming towards university, and as I said, academic learning is the way you prefer learning, then VCE IB is the course that you would choose. VET is simply a subject, and you can absolutely choose a VET as part of your VCE, and it will not disadvantage you in going to university. It will either be a subject that you can get a score in that will add to your ATAR, even if it's a VET that doesn't carry a score, because many of them don't, you will still get a percentage increment added to your score, and therefore your ATAR. So VET is designed so that it can go into a VCE program as one of your 6 subjects in year 12 and year 11, sorry, so that it won't disadvantage you in terms of going to university. I hope that answers that part of the question.
No, I think that was great. Yeah. And lucky last, if you've done a year 12 subject in year 11, does that mean you can do one less subject in year 12?
So I'll only answer that from my school's point of view, but I think it will probably be common for many. Generally, schools need to have students in year 12 enrolled in 5 subjects. As I said, I'm not going to talk for other schools definitively about that. But I guess what I would say from my point of view is that the purpose of doing that early subject is primarily to get experience in year 12 and have that opportunity to go through that higher level of learning, see what that's like, and it does add a small opportunity to add to an ATAR, but that's not really why I would suggest doing it. I would suggest doing it because it gives you that opportunity, and in doing one less subject in year 12, you are, in a sense, removing part of that opportunity that you accessed a year earlier. So the final part of that answer, though, is you must talk to your school about that, because I can't speak for other schools.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue to my final point before we wrap up today, is hopefully this session you found useful, and it was a good kind of introduction into what to expect in the next few months. And now you can go and have a chat with your career advisors and talk to your parents and friends and find out more. And then if you have any other questions, you can always contact the tertiary providers directly as well. I know Anna, Swinburne and myself are MIT, and all the institutes and ITCs and everyone have their details on their website, so you can hopefully go in if there's no lockdown and have a look at the facilities, the open days and things like that, or also just give them a call or send them an email. But thank you everyone for joining us this evening. As I said, hopefully you found it useful and you got a bit of information out of it. We will be having a couple more webinars coming up in the next few months, so make sure you have a look at the TIS website and have a look at those dates. They'll all be, useful. Maybe give yourself a bit of an idea what to expect in future years as well. But yeah, thanks for joining us and hope you have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Tarika.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna, Tarika.